We face challenges there, going into territory that's unsafe, threats to our lives. There are so many people who've had to die that we've witnessed. Newsrooms across the continent are closing. As journalists, our job is no longer to break news. The world is taking a step back from us, so it's our time to take this space and really tell the story of our continent. John-Allan Namu professionally is an investigative journalist and a storyteller, someone who's trying to be an author, trainer, speaker. But the thing that I'm most proud of professionally, obviously, is my journalistic career. In the newsroom, I think what we did was we occupied a space that no one was in. At the time that we began looking into investigative work, no one was really doing in-depth work for broadcast. There had been some work that was being done on print, but it had been a long time, I should say, that since someone did anything for broadcast. So the transition was pretty smooth because we were creating things that people had very little recollection of, at least in terms of the audience. And that growth was very quick. So I joined the newsroom in 2005. By 2008, we had already begun to establish ourselves as investigative reporters, in spite of the work that we had done. Obviously, investigative reporting has its own challenges. There were threats to our lives, threats to our safety, to our families' lives. We've had to, leave the country one or two times. But I think the biggest threat for me has always been that self-imposed threat that you get something wrong. And so that's also driven me quite a bit to try and improve every time, just to be continuously improving the work that I do. I have to say that I'm very privileged as a journalist working in Kenya. Kenya, compared to a number of countries in East Africa, but also around Africa, is relatively free, relatively robust, and appreciates the role that we play. So traveling to different parts of Africa has been very sobering in seeing just how other journalists are struggling with the question of safety. Journalists in newsrooms, in legacy newsrooms, but also independent journalists. For me personally, I think one of the things in terms of access has always been a question of safety. When we were doing our stories about the South Sudanese money laundering scandals that we found in 2018, we faced quite a bit of challenges there. Going into territory that's unsafe. And since then, there's been this implicit order. I've never received anything officially, but it has been implied quite strongly that I should never go back to that country, and it's purely for just doing my work. Because I am a journalist who has enjoyed quite a bit of privilege in his career, I've only experienced some of the challenges that journalists experience vicariously through their own stories. And this is why in my training and as well as in my meetings with other journalists, I really try and listen as hard as I can for some of the challenges that they face, so that I can build it into my own program to ensure that I stay safe, but also I can pass on lessons to other journalists who might need the protections that I have enjoyed. In Africa, certainly it is that physically people are unsafe, especially the closer you go to the communities in rural areas where the power distance is much, much bigger than in the cities. Journalists are being threatened, targeted, bribed, assaulted, killed. And this is happening across East Africa and in larger parts of Africa. In the Sahel, for instance, journalistic critique is almost non-existent. Because of the problems that they're having there with militant groups, but also because they're now not in the grips of military government. People tend to forget that those kinds of governments usually brook no dissent when it comes to the freedom of the media. And so a lot of news deserts are developing across the continent. So I'd say physical safety is number one. The second is disinformation. With the advent of artificial intelligence, as well as the spread of the internet across the continent, the information ecosystem is becoming flooded with all sorts of disinformation. And that makes it much harder for a journalist to do simple things that should have been easier had the information ecosystem being cleaner. You have to prove and reprove and, and constantly verify. And this takes a lot of time away from the journalist. And then third, this is a universal one, but I'd say it's most acute in Africa. The question of resources, money. Newsrooms across the continent are closing. I think people are starting to shift their attention more to the information environment online. And that's, reasons that can be blamed on formal journalism or legacy media, but also other things that, that we had no control over, the business model, for instance. But the situation is now that journalism is severely underfunded, completely malnourished, and that will show up in the work. And now with the geopolitical realignments and movements and uncertainty around the world, that can only make things more difficult for journalists. My highest high, I've had very many, but my highest high was achieving my dream of opening Africa Uncensored. I dreamed of that moment. I spoke about it in 2009. And it's incredible that I've now spent 10 years doing something under my own brand, a brand that I've sweated for and created together with other people. It's really been a life's dream for me to do this. So that's my highest high. My lowest low. Covering violence is one thing, but covering it in your own country is something that I don't think people appreciate, just how devastating it is to the soul. I really hate covering violence, especially with the nature that we've seen in Kenya. I hate the fact that a lot of it is cyclical. It's tied to elections or tied to contestations for power. I hate the fact that there are so many people who've had to die that we've witnessed, and our journalism can do nothing about it. And there have been many moments like that. But I think this abiding belief in the power of storytelling and of journalism is what keeps me here. That if we are able to tell better stories, to reach more people, and to be as truthful in every story that we produce, then maybe we will change this continent. Before founding Africa Uncensored, I had an appreciation for the toll that journalism takes on you, but I never really sought any help. After joining Africa Uncensored, when I became responsible for other journalists, I realized that it was something urgent and that we had to do something. So in the health insurance policies that we've taken, we always ensure that mental health is covered. Like you can seek the help of a psychologist or a psychiatrist. We try to educate our teams and have days where, psychologists just come and talk us through things. We try and build an environment in our newsroom that's collegiate, so people can feel like there's someone in the newsroom who understands what they're going through, that can be spoken to. We're not perfect. We try our best. But what I will say is that our experience is not everybody else's. Journalists are left to their own devices. I personally know journalists who've gotten into heavy drinking, alcoholism, substance abuse, beginning to have antisocial behavior, quitting altogether, and really affecting materially the quality of their lives. People do not appreciate just how much journalists see. We are at the nexus between the thing that you think can never happen in your country, that bad thing, and the people who need to see an edited, cleaned up version of it. We see everything. We are the medium through which some of the worst parts of humanity are on display. And I don't know if people can yet appreciate just how many walking wounded journalists there are across Africa, across the world. We don't have money, we don't have resources, but we have each other. Let's start there. As long as we can stand up for one another, as long as we can stand together, we can face anything. I have a very strong belief in that, because when journalists stood up for me in my hour of need, I felt supported. Now, look at, for instance, a journalist who was very badly injured while covering protests in Kawempe in these recent by-elections. The man has no health insurance. People are fundraising for him. The journalistic fraternity should be at the forefront of demanding that this never happens again in Uganda or anywhere else. But it starts with solidarity. Start to form into media clubs and organizations. Breathe new life into those organizations that are now defunct. Take leadership and ownership of these initiatives, because if we don't, we will perish alone. Know before you go. So what the first one, know before you go, denotes the use of risk assessment plans. Try and think through every risk that you could possibly meet while you're in the field and after leaving the field, because there's also other risks. Your story might be the sort that's unpopular with the public, even though it's truthful. And you might get trolled for it. You might be the target of physical attacks. But knowledge of these things beforehand, or at least planning for them, helps soften the blow. The second, as I mentioned, is solidarity. You must have a network of people, a support system, whether in your journalistic fraternity or even socially, that can just be that place where you go and seek some sort of safety, and a place that you can go to be vulnerable. I'd say the third thing is just acting responsibly when you go into the field. Your journalism career is a badge of honor, but it's not a bulletproof vest. So don't take unnecessary risks simply because you're a journalist. The final thing I would say is an important tip for me in journalism is take care of your social media footprint, right? Be careful about what you share online. Switch off your location, right? Share information with sources safely, right? Use tools that are safe. Don't call important sources on open lines, right? Just practice that kind of hygiene regularly. Make it a practice in your life, and you should be, for the most part. Safety is a going concern and will be a going concern on this continent, as long as there are bad actors who feel empowered and there's an environment in which impunity is not being met with justice. Safety is definitely a place that Ukweli Africa should focus. Specifically safety of journalists, but also safety of sources, whistleblowers, etc. Another area that I think Ukweli Africa can focus on, obviously, is investigative journalism. Speaking as the co-founder of an investigative journalism outfit, there is not nearly enough journalism, investigative journalism, that we experience and enjoy in Africa, much less so in Uganda. So I think that's another area. The third thing is explainer journalism. We are, and you've heard me say this, as journalists, our job is no longer to break news. Our job is to explain what the news means, so that our audiences can figure out how to navigate the world around them. So those would be the three areas that I think would be very, very strong. But one piece of advice that I would give is figure out what commercial value that you have as an organization and leverage it, so that you have the funds to be able to survive in lean times and the funds to grow when things are good. I think my message would be to African journalists. Now is the time for you to really step forward. It's always been your time, but now is really the time for you to step forward. The world is taking a step back from us. So it's our time to take this space and really tell the story of our continent and tell it truthfully. I'm a very, very big believer in what happens on this continent, specifically via journalism. I believe that our profession has a power that not many professions have. And it's in a very simple thing, the power of a story. Stories are powerful. Stories can make nations. They can break nations. But stories can also bring the change that we want, especially true stories. And the last thing that will keep you safe is tell the truth. Use facts, and stop where the facts tell you to stop. Nobody hates being lied about more than a liar. And those are the people who are the most dangerous when they're lied about. Over the next 5 to 10 years, we want to be a platform where the best journalists in Africa can come to tell their stories. We want to be a partner to journalists across the continent where we can collaborate to tell good stories, but also to talk about things like this, safety, the environment in which we live. We want to be a place where the best insights about the world around us can be found. And finally, we'd like to be the last word in Africa.